the Altria marketing team that you'll see on your chat windows. You can also chat directly with host. And if you have any connection questions, for those of you who are not big WebEx users, on your WebEx sort of little mini dashboard, there'll be a thing that looks like a cartoon bubble. That is, in fact, the chat icon. We will be starting in a few minutes. Thank you very much for joining. Just based on my watch, we have another minute or two to go before we officially start off. There will be questions and answers at the end. So if you do have questions throughout, just type them into the Q&A tab, and we'll get to as many as we can. I think we should be okay time-wise. This is a full 1 hour. We'll try to keep to about 55 minutes and let people get a jump to head to their kitchens for lunch. Or for those of you in Europe, catch an early dinner snack. Or for you in California, late breakfast. You'll be turning off the video once we get everyone settled in. I just thought it'd give a chance for us all to be a little more connected in the new normal, or at least the normal that's going to continue for a couple of weeks for most of us. Today, so we've got probably about 2/3 of the folks we expected. The count is still going up at 1 or 2, 3, 4 a minute. So we are going to give everyone a couple of more minutes to jump onto the call. Again, if you're having audio difficulties, you really can't hear me, so it doesn't really matter. If you're having video difficulties, please do use the chat icon in your WebEx dashboard. It looks like a little thought bubble, or a cartoon bubble, if you will, and chat host, and host will help you out as best he or she can. For those of you who might be having distortion issues on our audio today, probably just your method of connection, shaky Wi-Fi, kids streaming too much on-demand TV. But once I drop my video, that'll also pick up a little bit. So again, just sort of maintaining video to say hi, be human. We'll shut this down in just a second as we get into our presentation. As a reminder to everyone, and we will be recording this session, so that's why nobody else's voice is live. This way I'm the only person that can be held accountable or blamed. I just saw someone raise their hand. Excellent. So the host will reach out to you, Olivia, and we'll take care of any connection problems you might be having. Besides questions at the end, you can certainly send them in as we go. Today's session will be both a presentation and a live demonstration of the software, or of our software anyway. And as I had promised through some of our posts, there will be absolutely zero fear-mongering here. This is just how to get information out of your contracts that can help you prepare for some pretty unusual times ahead. Looks like we're starting to stabilize in terms of the number of folks joining. So with that, I am going to turn off the vid just so that no one can really blame me. Or maybe I won't turn off the vid. Okay. Very good. So first and foremost, thank you very much for taking time out of your Tuesday to join us. My name is Arthur Augette. I am Executive Vice President and Co-founder of Altria. And Altria is a contract lifecycle management company that is very much leveraging applied artificial intelligence in all that we do. Part of what we'll be chatting with today, and Braden Robinson, one of our senior consultants, has joined me as well, and he'll help us when it comes to the Q&A section, maybe even during some of the demos, is that we have decoupled or separated out parts of our artificial intelligence engine, Orbit, to allow us to make short work of contract analytics, extraction of metadata, and identification of clauses that might be useful in preparing for sort of visibility into your revenue resiliency, sticky revenue, things that people can't get out of, and likewise maybe helping you and your team provide for supply chain agility, whether that is materials or services, or even contract or contracted labor. So with that, we're going to sort of jump in just to set the stage for today. We'll try to maybe shave a couple of minutes out of this, but it's about 55 minutes or so. Do a brief overview of how AI plays in the CLM world, so to speak, about 10, 15 minutes, and then really spend almost half an hour in the platforms itself, sort of showing what it can be used for, how it works. Talk about Orbit Explorer for metadata extraction and clause identification. And then Orbit Protector, which is the flavor or persona of Orbit that helps us identify or helps you identify our risk factors or intent within clauses and sort of go beyond just simple clause identification. Then we'll spend some time specifically on some risk factors that have been identified by ourselves and by a handful of our customers, and just share with you what they've been looking for, what kind of analysis they're finding useful, and then questions and answers as we wrap up. So I promise to minimize both advertising or adverts, as well as any fear mongering. Really, we also know what we're up against, but let me tell you a little bit about Altria and where we play. Altria is a true sort of life cycle, contract life cycle management company. So when I say true life cycle, we look at it from the intake or the request to have an agreement crafted or reviewed, through the internal review and approvals, external negotiation, the execution, the signing, so to speak, but then just as importantly, the post-award management, ensuring that you are getting the value out of the contracts that you've negotiated. And part and parcel of each one of these phases is applied artificial intelligence. In fact, many of our customers don't even realize there's an AI engine running. They simply see a cleaner, easier to use, more streamlined process. And what we've seen most recently as a result of the current pandemic and also the concerns about the economic impact, both near term and maybe medium term, is that folks are looking to understand what kind of risks are inherent in their contracts, where they may have some flexibility, and they're getting questions from their leadership in terms of how to optimize cash flow, how to minimize obligation, and how to be as agile as possible. And really leveraging contracts as an asset is a great idea. So that sort of gives you the 360 sort of view of what we're offering today. And as we sort of go past the full CLM, and we're happy to do a session at some other point in time when the dust settles, etc., let's really jump right into what Orbit is. So Orbit is the artificial intelligence engine that has traditionally been embedded within the Altria CLM. And for those companies that are not quite ready to embark on a CLM solution, or you have a enterprise content management system or a document management repository, whether it's on-prem or out in the cloud somewhere, or even those of you who may be using someone else's contract management solution, there may be a requirement, and a very timely requirement, to be able to dip into your contract assets and identify those assets that can help you be more flexible or help you be somewhat stickier. Now, I just noticed, just because I have a monitor running for what you guys are seeing, is that my PowerPoint is running a couple of seconds, if not a full minute, behind my voice. So I'll apologize, and I'll keep a tighter look on that. So the PowerPoint has just caught up to me, and I usually am pretty caffeinated, so I'm not that surprised. But Orbit, just in summary, now that you're looking at the screen, is the AI engine that has been embedded within the Ultrius CLM. And what Orbit brings is sort of this separate AI process that can be run with other contract repositories or document repositories to do a high level as well as rather detailed level analysis and tagging of contracts as they exist for you today. Now, Orbit is available in 3 separate personas. And just waiting for the screen to refresh for you. There is the Orbit Guide, Orbit Explorer, and Orbit Protector. So Orbit Guide is an environment that assists the intake and sort of the request process that performs cognitive analysis of third-party content when you intake, and then provides suggestions and sort of guides the user into the right way to process or move a contract. And that's very tightly coupled to our CLM. Orbit Explorer is what we'll be looking at today, as well as Orbit Protector. And Orbit Explorer allows you to quickly navigate and search and analyze thousands and tens of thousands of contracts with incredible speed and ease and precision, and be able to draw key information such as metadata or data about the contracts, as well as performance data from your targeted goals from within the contracts, as well as identify key clauses. And Orbit Protector goes the next step, so to speak, and allows a deeper analysis at the subclause or sentence or word or string level to identify not just clauses, but the intent of words. And this is where we can look at a deeper dive. So if Orbit Explorer can identify force majeure, Orbit Protector tells us what are the conditions for force majeure and whether there are any mitigating circumstances around it that may limit its invocation, or whether termination for convenience has a particular window of opportunity for it, that you can only terminate for convenience within 30 days of a renewal, or that you must give 90 days of notice to do a TFC, and in the meantime, the clock continues to build. And if you miss it, you're sort of out of luck. These are the things that go beyond the simple exploration, if you will, and get into the mode of protection and allowing the system to remind you with enough time to act. So there are some things that Orbit has working today that are probably just worth noting because they're sort of germane or they're very much important to how we engage with Orbit Protector and our bundled sort of risk factors for both revenue resiliency and supply chain agility. Orbit is a full stack environment. We say full stack, meaning that you really don't need much else other than Orbit running in the cloud, and we run on Amazon Web Services. But Orbit includes the OCR process, which is optical character recognition, converting images to text, natural language processing that then cleans up that text to make it easier or more efficient for machines and programs to read from that text. An example might be collapsing a 2-column contract into a single column, or understanding where sentences and paragraphs break, and minimizing, well, for those of us old Microsoft Word users, minimizing widows and orphans so that we can understand the context and intent of text. Additionally, it is extracting metadata and also normalizing or even calculating or deriving metadata from information that is among and within the contract text. It also has the ability to identify clauses not based on their title, but on their content. And all of this information can be easily exported as a CSV or an Excel file, if you will, or loaded into another system for deeper analysis. The OCR and NLP, optical character recognition and natural language processing, leverages two commercial engines today, both Avi and Nuance. I believe Nuance was acquired by Kofax. And we also track emerging, such as the Tesseract project, looking to see if that is going to surpass the commercial offers. And then the natural language processing is run after the OCR for corrections to create better processable text. For those of us who often get wet signed contracts via fax, and believe it or not, that is still a method from some parts of the globe. This also removes things like the header, footer, and watermarks. As we continue, the metadata extraction, and again, just keeping track of the slide advancement for you folks on the WebEx, and I think we can all understand how taxed right now our friends at WebEx must be. But in production today, we're able to extract about 35 different common metadata elements. Including things like, and it's waiting for your page to refresh, contract titles and types. It will match document numbers, such as a master document number or a non-disclosure reference. Extract contracting parties, including multi-party information. Key dates, such as when is the contract effective. Do the calculation, it is effective as of first date signed or last date signed. Identifying governance, jurisdiction, and the like. Accuracy is in the high 80s and coverage is in the high 80s. Now, for those of you who track AI, what that means is that for 80% of the data elements that are in a contract, providing that they are there, we will find them and extract them, and that we will do that correctly. We also have a closed loop environment. This is what we call machine-based learning. And this allows for either yourselves or your legal services partner or subcontractor who may be reviewing this information to provide feedback directly into the platform and for the platform to learn from that feedback. More importantly, for general orbit use as well as for the protector COVID risk factor use, this allows us to take a pre-existing base of risk factors and allow us to quickly and efficiently optimize patterns for your particular industry or needs. Additional metadata normalization includes amounts, periods, and dates, converting terms, frequency, and the like. Now, going beyond metadata is understanding the content a little bit more. And what this really involves is understanding paragraph text to clause mapping and looking at the content of paragraphs, not just the titles. And we'll go through a couple of, I think, interesting examples. We currently use multiple algorithm types to disassemble and understand text. And these include things such as structural. In other words, what sentences are where. We use semantic, which disassembles each sentence to understand its intent and assign that intent to specific mathematical models. And then a sentiment style algorithm that is looking for those things that flip the meaning of a phrase or term 180 degrees. I know an example that Braden likes to use, and it's very straightforward, is simply the car is red, the car is not red. And by the way, for those of you with little ones at home, I just have this mad urge to quote Dr. Seuss. But the car is red, the car is not red. Incredibly similar, same structure, same semantic, but the sentiment is 180 degrees off, right? Flip opposite. So shall not, will versus may. These are the things that we're capturing as part of the clause match, because that also allows us to identify risk factors and those things that don't meet your current baselines. We effectively show the best matches for these clause, these paragraphs to your clause library or to your risk factors, and further go to this level of extent of identifying which clauses may be missing from third-party paper when it comes to template match and risk mitigation. This allows you to identify missing clauses in third-party paper and very quickly add those. For instance, you don't particularly care for the way that they've defined their force majeure, you want to replace it with yours, simple process. From a contract analytics perspective, the ability to identify exact match and near match so that you can prioritize how you act and where you act, and just as importantly in this incredibly cost-conscious mode that we're in right now, who should react? Is this handled by a non-attorney legal professional? Is it handled by an LPO? Is it handled by in-house? Or handled by out-house counsel? So let's flip into a demonstration itself. And it looks like our WebEx performance is sort of increasing a little bit. So let's see how we get. So I've logged into the Altria platform and just waiting to see if the WebEx catches up. Super. See if I typed the right password, and I did. So welcome to Orbit. And again, Orbit is applied artificial intelligence, normally integrated into the core CLM. But in our world, we're sort of allowing a little bit of a separation, which we think can prove useful for contract analytics. Let's just take a very simple example. I'll just create a new batch for today. Today's April 7th. And let's go pull a couple of sales contracts, maybe distribution agreements. And Tuesday test is my comment. Let's go ahead and grab a couple of files to process. And what we're going to do is I'm going to grab both a text file and I'm going to grab a PDF, since some of you may want to see how we handle PDFs. So I've brought these two files in, and I'm going to go ahead and analyze these documents. Let's go ahead and analyze these. Now, while this is processing, let me flip over to Adobe Acrobat real quick and show you the PDF that I loaded up. And we'll just wait for our screen to catch. There we go. So I think this is probably not unlike what many of you see when you look inside of your document repository or your SharePoint or your shared files. So this is a PDF. Clearly had been sort of highlighted before it was scanned and loaded into the repository. It's multi-column. It's got those weird footers from somebody's bad printout. It's not super in terms of its resolution. It's got signatures. It's got stamps on it. Again, sort of waiting for our WebEx to catch up. And this is probably indicative of real world. Just sort of a big fan, if you will, of showing our work. I'm going to go back to the browser. It looks like we've completed our sort of initial processing. Now, we've got two files here. Let's go ahead and click in and take a look at these. And let's look at that PDF that's now been converted to text, shall we? So, first thing is metadata. We can see on the right-hand side where metadata has been tagged, and it's sort of highlighted in a little blue box. This allows us to quickly see what's been extracted and what's not. On the left side, we see that we've got populated metadata, which is also part of the reporting and the analysis and the exporting of the information. And I can click on any one of these, and it'll bring me back to where in the document it extracted this information from. Makes for very quick updates and for processing and review. Now, some fields, if I click into them, don't give me that kind of quick hop. As an example, expiry date. Well, we know the effective date was July 18th. I can't click in the term either, and let's see why. This particular contract, the term is specified as 4 years, FOUR, and we know that we want to track in, basically integers of years, 4.0. This could have been 48 months. But Ultra Orbit has done some basic calculations to figure out, okay, we want to track this as a 4-year rather than 48-month, and this is going to be the new expiry date. Now, I noticed when we sort of scanned the left-hand side that jurisdiction and governing law were not there. And the reason for that is there is no jurisdiction or governance section. But if I sort of scan the document, I notice that under severability, there is reference to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So as I move my mouse over this, and I just release the mouse, the system knows that, well, I found this. Odds are I wanted to tag it. This is going to be governance. I start typing govern, it pulls up governing law, I say okay, and then on the left side we see that that's been populated. Now jurisdiction I can likewise pull, or I can simply say jurisdiction judge's backyard, since we are now all working from home, and I can make these changes permanent by hitting approve. Now if instead I want to take a look at what we do with clauses, and I've moved over to the Clauses tab, Orbit has created an index that allows me to quickly navigate across and through the agreement. And just as importantly, though, I said it's pretty accurate, but I see that I've got two clauses here, two paragraphs, property rights and warranties, and they've both been marked as reps and certs, or representation and warranties. I look at property rights, and just as a quick scan, this doesn't really look like a warranty. But Orbit itself has said, it's likely that it's representations, but it could also be intellectual property. This allows me to quickly select the different choice. And now, if I click on approve, this information will be updated in Orbit and then exported to whatever target system we have. So I'm going to say, sure, let's go ahead and approve this document. Now, keeping an eye on the time, let's just go over to the other document, DA. This happens to be a distribution agreement. And one of the things that might be interesting here, we look at the metadata, and here we have much more information populated, including governance and the like, including, let me see, U.S. District Court, so full extraction. Now, I think the metadata here looks good, but the clause-wise, what I see here is just sort of weird. Distributor responsibilities is mapped to insurance. Let's go see why. We click over to distributor responsibilities, and I look at this particular paragraph, and the distributor is supposed to have term insurance throughout the term. Such insurance, local industry, maintain a copy of this insurance. With the exception of the last sentence, this entire paragraph really is about the insurance that the distributor needs to maintain. So here we've just shown how Orbit has gone beyond the title and looked at the content to identify the intent of the clause or the paragraph. We'll approve this one as well. And now, if we wished, we could go ahead and take these and export information directly to another platform. And I think my machine is a little bit faster. Let me just do a quick share. What I've done is I've selected the top two contracts. I said, yes, let's go take a look at running a quick report, export this information to an Excel sheet. And once WebEx catches up, sorry for the radio silence, just letting the system catch. There we go. You see the two contracts that I've grabbed. You see the basic metadata information here, and this could all be sort of pushed and moved into another related system. Trying to minimize our back and forth here to keep us on pace. Let's go ahead and take a look at Orbit Protector. And Orbit Protector goes the next level down, and it's really Orbit Protector that we have reinforced with risk factors that are specific to the financial uncertainty that we're stepping into as a result of the global pandemic. But let's just grab an NDA example, and let me grab, let's see here, do I have an NDA example? There we go. So I've taken an NDA model, I'm running that across a particular file. Now this is taking a little bit for those of you watching on screen. What Orbit Protector is doing is not only is it taking image files or text files and making sure they're machine readable, but they're going beyond that to provide specific risk treatments. So if it's something like governing law, and I'm just watching my click path here so you guys aren't totally confused, I click on governing law on the left, the document advances on the right-hand side, showing the parts of a paragraph that are appropriate. Maybe I'm looking at post-termination obligations for that NDA. Notice there's absolutely zero titling here. This is reading each and every single word to determine what, and we're again waiting for the system to catch. It's reading each and every single word to identify the intent. And this is why you need this sort of level of depth at a relatively rapid pace. We recently ran a test. We did about 1,000 contracts going through a single GPU, which is faster than a CPU, in just about 5 hours to provide this kind of information and insight. So using the NDA example, just because it's easy to show on screen, we see how it's found pieces of obligations or injunctive relief as the case may be. Now, coming back into where we sort of started, which is how we can go and leverage Orbit Protector for additional risk factors. In addition to the core metadata extraction that you would need for managing and tracking contracts, right? And really, here what we're talking about is ensuring that you've got revenue resiliency. You know what you can count on. You know what might not be so bookable, if you will, and you put the right resources on tracking that. Likewise, you look at your supply chain side, because your CFO is no doubtedly looking at cash flow and understanding where you might have flexibility in your expenses and your supply chain, whether it's direct goods material, whether it's indirect, or whether it's labor. So it's really about being able to do some basic extraction so you know what you're looking at, and then getting into the specifics for intent and example wording that make sense for that particular domain. So in a sales agreement, you're looking for content or intent around making sure or identifying what revenue is going to be resilient. The basics, of course, force majeure, what's included and excluded in particular force majeure clauses, whether it's your paper or someone else's, right? The presumption is that these are negotiated documents that you've already signed. Is there a termination for convenience clause? Are there any limits to that? If so, what are the limits? And extract those limits. What is the notice period if it is TFC, right? Are there clauses for termination for insolvency, specifically in those agreements? And then understanding in very direct ways, what is the current term? Is it a fixed term? Is it a fixed term plus options? But having that information in black and white. You should likely have had it when the order was booked, but your sales team is remote now. They're all remote, right? It may be that you're the calmest head in the organization and you've got access to your contractual entitlements, your contractual obligations. There is no more word, favor trade, horse trade at the field level. What does the book say? And allowing something like Orbit Protector to help identify those things and make them very crystal clear and separate them out is absolutely key. Likewise, when we move into the supply chain environment, if I'm looking to optimize cash flow as a CFO, I want maximum cash in, I want minimum cash out. I want to do this to sort of protect the company. I want to do this to protect my employees, right? So where are there opportunities to be a little bit more creative, a little bit more agile around my supply chain? Certainly the same about force majeure. In this case, you're looking for things that help you out. Right? Do you have epidemic, pandemic in there? Also interpretation. If the government moves all of your people out because they're non-essential, does that give you the right to invoke force majeure? And of course, there are probably tons of blogs and posts being written right now about what does force majeure really mean. It is not a get out of jail free card. I think we understand that. You still need to take this and either go to court or go to settlement. Right? But at least you know that as a sort of use of the superior force clause is there to meet it. Termination for convenience, in this case, what can you get out of, right? Or can you also sort of put something on pause? It's an interesting angle for supply chain. If you have volume commits, or if you have, I'll say, periodic drawdowns from pre-bought inventory, those kinds of things, can you talk with your suppliers and say, listen, March, April, maybe May, not good months, but let's just sort of shift this deal. Let's put our agreement on pause and extend the out date by 90 days. Right? Many suppliers would be much happier with that than hey, I'm not going to do anything with you ever, and I'm going to wheedle out of my deal. But getting that information up front is sort of key. You may actually have clauses already written for those kinds of events. But certainly being able to quantify your fixed term, what kind of renewals you have, when you can renegotiate, and having that in black and white in a way that you can now present, here are my top 500 or here are my top 1,000 supplier contracts, and here's the flexibility that I have. How do I triage this? How do I prioritize this? And if your workforce is a little unsettled, unsure, they're looking for guidance. They're looking for smaller, more measurable steps. At least that's what I'm finding with a lot of our customers and even some of our team members. Get those easy to digest tasks out there and sort of accelerate to the new normal. It's going to be weird for a while. Also, there are some unusual triggers for negotiation that are possibly embedded in these contracts. And certainly on the supply chain side, you'll see them. You may or may not see them on the revenue side. But these could be based on, let's say, volume level agreements or tiers. You may also have certain trigger events. As an example, and I use the term tied to index, you may have a particular price model that is based on consumer price index, minus retail, or CPI index minus labor. There are several of these out there. And for long-term agreements, this gives you some level of cost certainty. That's a term I picked up from one of our team members. He knows who he is, so hat tip to Scott. But if we're looking at volume tiers, triggers, index triggers, I may have the right to renegotiate if the forex rate between GDP and US dollar exceeds such and such an amount. These are things that they're good to know, because as we approach the more somewhat volatile recovery window, and we know we're going to recover, it's the human, sort of a reason to exist is to adapt and move forward. Let's make sure that you're armed. And again, I think that these are questions that a lot of you are being asked by your finance team, and not just your legal team. And let's make sure that you have what you need. A little bit of an advert, and then we'll sort of get back into what's included, so to speak. Let's take a look at the demonstration really before we get into that. So if we look at sort of Orbit Protector at the text-based intent model, we need to be able to very quickly train or add new risk factors. So yes, we have things like force majeure, we have termination for convenience, we know about renewals. All of that is absolutely key, but there may be things that are unique to your business. So in order to be able to add those elements within Orbit, it's a matter of taking 3 or 4 sample contracts, finding clauses that you want to look for, and not just clauses, but pieces of text, sentences, tidbits, abbreviations, identifying those as risk factors and simply adding it to the model. And then allowing Orbit to run across your repository, or loading your files from your old Documentums or your Hummingbird environments, your Highland environments, your SharePoint, shared file mounts, things that you've got sitting out on like iDrive or cloud, bring them into the platform and allow Orbit to identify those patterns. And this goes beyond just a text match, right? You can do that with a Control F on a lot of people and a lot of keyboards, right? Or you let the software identify those matches and variants and derivatives and things that are similar, because that's the way the AI works. And identify similar clauses, similar sentences, similar phrases, and not just identify them, but then identify the risk associated based on match against what you're expecting. Identify which contracts have the most risk factors. You can also think about risk factors as agile factors or flexibility factors, if you will. And then just as importantly, identify within each of those contracts where those words and sections and clauses are. So we can take the screen that we see here and we can export that out just as we saw the Excel sheet earlier. Or I can go into each and every single contract and be immediately brought, bookmarked, if you will, to those clauses or those phrases that are of interest as we're looking at both revenue risk mitigation, identifying your resilient revenue, but also identifying where in your supply chain you can adjust or amend your costs, or simply also identify risks in key supply chain elements as and when appropriate. We really are not trying to fearmonger or chase ambulances. We do know, though, that we've got customers who are asking for additional insight. We've simply decoupled our Orbit AI engine to allow for sort of a turnkey service where we can quickly take your contracts after signing an NDA. We have all of the security environments that you would expect. We're running on AWS, SOC certed, and the like. We can then look at the metadata that we typically extract. You may have some additional metadata that's key or required for your business. We provide a delivery point. We'll run a quick sample after you deliver contracts to us. Assuming the sample hits the mark, we will then sort of crank up the machine and allow the machine with some minimal QA on our side to generate that output result and deliver it back to you. We can do this at a cost certain price point. We have tiers up to 10,000 incoming documents. Your deliverable will be a report in Excel format for each contract processed with its metadata, a link to the output OCR file, full summary of analytics so that you can group and organize that as you need to, and that each risk clause tagged in the contract, highlighted text, and we are generally seeing turnaround of anywhere from 2 to 4 days. So I'd like to open it up for questions. We're probably running almost on time. So I'd like to try to wrap this up, give everyone a couple of extra minutes of their day back. Braden, do you have any specific questions? Or I've grabbed a couple off the wire.
Yeah, I see you've already covered most of them. I think the one that's still on here is, what is required to start this? What information or access?
Perfect. So in order to sort of get going with this, to the basics, right, is getting a non-disclosure and there's some paperwork. But fundamentally, what a customer needs or prospect needs to do to prepare for this is sort of identify where your contracts are. They may be in multiple spaces, and that's great. But really, all we need as input are the contracts that are either executed in image or they're executed and they've already been scanned. But we simply need those contracts. All we need to do then is just to jump on a conference call and work out the specifics around what kind of metadata elements you're looking to gain out of your contracts. And also, are there any specific clauses? An example might be, the last 2 years, your contract terms have been great. You've got nice buttoned up force majeure, you've got no TFC, and everyone is signed up to a 5-year contract with options for year 6 and 7. But 3 years ago, when you were just launching 3 or 4 products, maybe you had slightly more flexible terms. So as part of our analysis, you'd also like us to understand or to extract information about those specific product offerings for 2013 to 2015, and do a quick triage to make sure that those contracts are still active, and identify other sort of clause or other terms or other text that has legal intent, and have that extracted separately and put into a report. Really, we're trying to make sure that at the onset, we understand what it is you're looking for out of this, in addition to that sort of base coverage, right? Identification of potential challenges in revenue capture or revenue recognition, identification of those that are just spot on great. Likewise, on the supply chain side, if we have to run through every contract you have to pull that out, the processing side of it is in the OCR, it's in the parsing, it's in the reading. Capturing 1 or 2 additional elements or capturing another clause or 2 is not very heavy lifting, and if we can help add value, that's great. So that's really, I probably gave you a very long answer. Sorry, whoever asked that question. To simplify that, all we need is for you to be able to send us or point us to those contracts. And then we take care of the rest. We deliver a result, and that result can further help you jumpstart your path to CLM if you have not taken that particular direction yet, or to perhaps even just improve your enterprise content management platform as it exists today with more robust information to help you prepare for the challenge of today, as well as, I think, the challenges that we're all going to face as we look at a somewhat prolonged economic recovery cycle. Let's see. Someone just asked you, do we need to integrate into your platforms? No. If you're running a SharePoint environment or a OneDrive, or if you've got something even proprietary, as long as you can make that data available to us, even if it's an image repository, where you got click to accepts with e-cigs or something, anything that can be sent over is absolutely fine. If it's in a public spot and you can get your IT guys to let us have access, we can pick that up pretty much straightforward. Hey, Braden, I just saw one question. I don't know whether this has come up on your console. Do you have to subscribe to Orbit? Is it like an annual license? No. We'd love you to use it if you've got a sustained reason. Please, absolutely. But this is a turnkey, relatively low invest. We're just trying to be helpful to the folks that we've talked to, knowing that things are going to be a little uncertain for a while.
I think that covers the questions on my console.
Perfect. No, thanks. And again, just because of some of the WebEx challenges, I'm running my mobile for my audio on this, and that's giving me a limited view. Well, with that, I certainly like to extend another note of thanks. And Braden, thanks very much for joining me today and contributing. To all those other folks who have joined, I hope you and yours are well and stay well. And let us know as things progress. Reach out to us on our generic info@altria.com if you've got any questions about this particular offer. And if you have ideas or risk factors that you want to bounce off, we're always happy to sort of learn. The advantage of an AI platform for many folks is that the machine-based learning that we have is cumulative, albeit anonymous. So that as more and more people look for different risk factors or clause types or patterns, the engine gets that much smarter. And it's that much more flexible across different kinds of agreements. Really, a force majeure statement in a sales agreement versus a supply side agreement, it's not much different. Term definition, termination for convenience. Everyone's buy side paper is someone else's sell side paper. What we see in oil and gas versus retail versus financial services, injunctive relief is injunctive relief. So even if you're in sort of a one-off industry or you feel that your needs are super, super unique, give us a ping, see if we can help you. Happy to run a sampler or two. With that, enjoy the rest of your afternoon or the rest of your morning, as the case may be. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.